Hello, so today I'm going to be analyzing the final round of a classical tournament I played around a month ago. So this is round 6, and this game was pretty short. It was pretty smooth. So here I go for e4. My opponent goes for the Sicilian defense with c5, and here I go for knight to c3. Knight to c3 is known as close Sicilian defense, and here I'm preparing to go into a Grand Prix or after knight to c6, bishop to b5 over here. Now, why did I go bishop to b5? Well, the idea is that if I go for f4, let's say they go g6 here, and then like bishop to g7, and then bishop here. Now they have this annoying move of e6, right? And my bishop's terrible. So we might as well exchange it with bishop to b5, because e6 will limit the bishop's ability of aiming at the f7 pawn, maybe some f4, f5, and now you can't take because then they can take with the f pawn. So they go for g6. G6 is known as a dragon Sicilian, so I just take. B takes c6, and I go for d3 following my Grand Prix setup, and they go bishop to g7. And here I thought, okay, well, we might as well develop the bishop with tempo, so why not go bishop to e3 first? So they go for d6, just following their standard dragon setup. f4 and e6 is played. e6 now e6 is still an effective move because it prevents f4 pushes, but e6 not really working against the bishop because there is no light squared bishop. If you remember, I traded it off earlier. So I go for knight to f3. My opponent goes for knight to e7, further preventing me from playing f4 breaks in the future. And here I just castle. My opponent short castles, and at this time, okay, so when I was evaluating this at the board, okay, my opponent does have the bishop pair, right? But these pawns are actually playing against a light squared bishop and some of their own pawns too, because e6 prevents the bishop from developing to some squares over at the king side, and these pawns are effectively blocking off the bishop, right? Yeah, the bishop is blocked by these three pawns, and if it tries to develop here, it's blocked not only by this pawn and by this pawn. So that was my evaluation. I think that I might be a little bit better here. Apparently the engine is saying I'm almost up a pawn, but I thought I was only a little bit better because their light squared bishop isn't really playing. So I just go rook to b1. Now the idea of rook to b1 is simple, because in these variations I want to put my knight on e2, right? And then h3, g4, and then knight goes to g3, and then maybe the knight can drop back so I can push f4. So in order to do that, I decided to defend the b2 pawn now because I thought, okay, if I go here, well, suddenly they just win a pawn, and there's nothing here. I'm just down a full pawn. So what I do is prophylactically defend the b pawn, and here they go for bishop to a6. Now the idea of bishop to a6 is to connect the rooks. Even though the bishop doesn't have a good place, you might as well connect the rooks, right? So after this move, I follow my plan. I go knight to e2, and here my opponent goes for rook to b8. Rook to b8, pressuring the b pawn. So here I play b3. Now, I was thinking about c3, but it does weaken this pawn a little bit. But it does limit this. But it does have some downsides like weakening this pawn, so I just go for a normal looking move, b3, right? Even though it does open up the bishop's not really pressuring anything, right? So here they go for queen to a5, pressuring some of my queenside pawns. So now they're playing over at the queen side. I go a4, but as you'll see later, uh, bringing most of their pieces to the queen side will ultimately lead to them getting checkmated. And here they play, in my opinion, a mistake. d5. Now their idea is, after I push e5, exactly what happens in the game, they have this square on f5, right? That's a nice place. But here I'm gonna simply just drop the bishop back, and g4 is coming. So that was their idea. Now, e4 isn't exactly the top move in the engine, but I think it's the best move. Here, queen to e1 is better, trying to trade off queens. But if you follow, if you're following the principle of playing against a bishop pair, you don't really want to go in an endgame. So this isn't really part of my plans. So let me just I go e5, keeping the queens here, not trading. And here they go for knight to f5, and here I just drop the bishop back to f2, and the g4 is coming anyway. So you're just helping me do my plan with tempo. So what did they do? They go rook f d8. Rook f d8. I don't know what that move does, and as you'll see later, this move will actually help me get a few tempos in my attack. So I go g4, and here they go knight to h6. Now after knight to h6, as you can see, the engine's already liking my position here, and here I just go h3, defending the g-pawn. They go d4, and suddenly the engine's saying I'm up 2 pawns. You know why? Because I missed this move, but my move also had a similar idea. The best move in the computer lines is bishop to h4. Putting the bishop here, you might be saying, why the heck would you do that? Okay, let's say the rook moves. Now you'll go knight to g3, right? Let's say queen to c7, and now is a time for a breakthrough. Oh wait, no. No, you go knight to e4. Knight to e4 first, not breakthrough, sorry. And the idea is we want to go to this f6 square, right? And if they take, then we just take. And suddenly our bishop is just crushing their position over here. That doesn't happen. Instead, you go knight to g3. Idea of going to this newly acquired outpost on e4. Here they go for queen to c7. Idea basically being that I can't push the pawn here on f5 because then I'll lose the e5 pawn. So I continue my plan with knight to e4. And here they play a weird move. They play queen to a5 again. Now, I have no idea what this move does. Like, he just repeated moves for some reason. I don't really know what that did. It just doesn't improve the position. But now I can simply go bishop to h4, and I'm suddenly getting a very good position here. They have to go back. They decide to go here, which is a little inaccurate because now I can go knight to f6. And after takes, I can simply take with the bishop. And suddenly, look at this bishop. They lost their bishop pair, and now it's an opposite side. It's an opposite colored bishop ending, but I'm simply better here because my bishop is controlling these weak dark squares. Because that in the Sicilian Dragon, because usually in the Sicilian Dragon, right? In the Sicilian Dragon, e4, c5. Let's say they play knight to f3, g6, d4 takes. Bishop goes here. I don't know. I'm just playing random moves. Yeah, and then here I would probably go for this move. Let's say they go here, and then this, and then this, and then castles, and then like queen goes here or something, and then rook to e8, right? And then they long castle, and usually I play something like e6 here. In in these positions with this e6 to g6, the dark squares are weak, so the better bishop in your position, or probably the best piece, is the bishop over here because it's controlling these weak squares, like the heart of your position. But once you trade it off, suddenly your position falls apart because of the weak dark squares. As you can see, look at this bishop, right? And this light squared bishop is limited by its own pieces. So I just go knight to g5, and you can't do anything about this pawn because if you go back, then what are you doing? You just wasted the tempo. And f5, I guess, and you're completely losing. They decide to give up the pawn with knight to g8, trying to take my bishop. But after knight takes, and the king goes here forced, they can't really take my strong bishop here because then they lose the exchange. So, what I play? I play f5. Finally, I make a breakthrough. Not only that, I'm up a pawn. So this is like a very much winning position here. They go rook db7. Now the idea of rook d b7 is, I guess, to set up a batter here. In the future, go c4 maybe, and then after takes, they sacrifice their bishop, right? And then I can't take because then rook takes. I just go queen to f3, and it's a tempo on the pawn on c6, and they blunder with c4, allowing me to take. And after they block with the rook, which is forced, I can simply go f takes e6. After f takes e6, I just take, and they blunder with knight to e7. I mean, it's not really a blunder because it's their only move. And after bishop takes e7, it's simply going to be checkmate. They go rook takes e7, and they get checkmated with rook f8. That is exactly what happened. It was just a smooth game. Really, I think their main inaccuracy was this move d5, allowing me to close off their dark squared bishop and taking some space. And then they did nothing, absolutely nothing here to address my kingside pawn storm, and they decided to put the majority of their pieces over at the queen side where they're not really doing anything, and they just allowed me to just set up an attack. And additionally, they played this weird move d4, allowing me to get this newly acquired outpost on e4. And then they also let me play bishop h4 with tempo, effectively removing their bishop off the board with knight to f6 check, takes. And then as you can see, their best piece in the position has been removed, and I go knight g5, hitting the pawn. They don't defend it, and then I ultimately make a breakthrough with f5, finally breaking through. And even though they castled, now their king's back in the center. So I pushed it back to the center, and then I played queen to f3, hitting the pawn, but they didn't see it. And then I just took, and then takes, and then it was checkmate. So that is the end of the video. And my next tournament, I'll post recaps on it probably next week. So make sure to like and subscribe, and that is the end of the video. Bye.